Hello everyone, Ember here, welcome back to a new video. In this one I'm going to be going over the best new cards for GLC from the set Obsidian Flames. So basically I'll be ranking each new type and all the new trainers from Obsidian Flames for GLC. The ranking is of course a personal opinion, with the main point of the video just to showcase really the best new cards for each typing. So as we'll start off I guess with dragon types, because there's only really one new dragon type worth talking about, and that's going to be Drampa. Drampa has a pretty nice attack, Outrage. It does 60 damage and then 10 more for each damage counter on Drampa. Not the worst Drampa in GLC probably, but probably a far cry from the best. But still, if you don't have a Drampa in your Dragon type GLC deck and you're looking for one that's pretty easy, pretty self-explanatory, can get those early KOs while also providing some decent offense support in the mid to late game, then Drampa could be a nice option for you. Next up, though, is we have Colourless Types. Now, unfortunately, Colourless has got the short end of the stick this time around in 12th place. There's Oinkologne and Bouffalont. Oinkologne could be nice in a control deck. Flip 3 coins, put a number of cards equal to a number of heads from your discard pile into your hand. Could be pretty nice. And then Bouffalont is okay, but it is a very coin flip heavier card. I'd say the best appeal of the Bouffalont is that it's quite high HP and has an ability that helps it tank a bit. So if you're going to build a GLC deck around big basic colorless Pokemon, then Bouffalont might be a nice addition to that deck. But yeah, colorless types, unfortunately, nothing too crazy. Next up, we have metal types, just beating out colorless types narrowly because of this new King Gambit. I honestly think this King Gambit's pretty decent. Execute says if your opponent's active Pokemon has 4 more damage counts on it, it's knocked out. And honestly, the way I see GLC going in the future is we're going to get more and more tanky Pokemon, especially with that new cape that's coming out in Paradox Rift, the one that gives a single price Pokemon plus 100 HP. So I think we'll see more and more tanky and bulky Pokemon. So of course, Pokemon like King Gambit that can just knock out anything are definitely prized and worth experimenting with. There's also this Bisharp on the right here, which I thought was worth bearing in mind because it does say if this Pokemon has no damage counters on it, this attack does 90 more damage. So just being able to do 120 for a single energy is pretty efficient in GLC. Then in 10th place, we have Dark types. Again, nothing too crazy, probably noticing a theme here with this set, even for GLC standards. But still, Paldean Clodsire can be pretty lethal with Venoshock, 80 damage, and if your opponent's active Pokemon is poisoned, this attack does 120 more. So it can do 200 damage, which is obviously an awful lot of damage for a GLC attacker to be doing. And it has decent synergy with, of course, the Garbodor that will say if you have a statement play, you may leave your opponent's active Pokemon poisoned, which is pretty decent. We also have this Malamar with the ability Psychic Insight for a little bit of control. It's nothing too crazy, but it will give you some idea of what your opponent's going to draw and what you're about to draw next turn. In 9th place, Fighting types. I did forget about Bonsly, rip. I don't think Bonsly is super crazy, but it is a nice free retreat pivot if you really want it. But yeah, I don't think Bonsly is super crazy, but Bonsly I guess worth bearing in mind if you're a big fan of that Pokemon. But Lycanroc with the attack finishing Fang, which is okay, does 90 damage, and if your opponent's active has any damage counters on it, or no damage counters I should say, this attack does nothing, which is really unfortunate, so you won't be able to donk any evolving basics if you went first. But it does mean that it's a good finisher, especially just doing 90 damage for single energy. Seems pretty decent to be honest. The Stunfisk is also okay, but doesn't really require a tool card for it to be any good. The Whiscash could honestly be a potential mill deck at some point, like if we ever get more fighting Pokemon like this Stack Attacker, for example, from the Sun and Moon era, then maybe we could see some kind of fighting type mill deck in GLC. Bit of a stretch right now, I think, but honestly, somewhere down the line, this could be pretty good. So that's why fighting types narrowly made it into 9th spot. Next up, we have lightning types, and there was only Thundurus really worth talking about. Thundurus, I thought was pretty decent. The ability is kind of nice because, as far as I can tell, lightning types don't actually have a bench barrier Pokemon. So the ability is kind of nice, even if it does only work when Thundurus is in the active spot. Then the attack, Gigantic Bolt, does 140, which is honestly an awful lot for 2 energy, but it does do 90 to itself. So you'd have to combo this with something like Protection Cube. So it is kind of annoying in that sense, but 140 is such a lot of damage. I just thought it was definitely worth bearing in mind if you're playing a lightning type deck. Next up, though, is grass types, and honestly, grass types are doing pretty well compared to at least most other types from this set for GLC. So Scavallion can duel itself as both grass and fire, which is pretty decent because, of course, fire is hitting 2 weaknesses really, metal and grass. So that's pretty decent and good to see. Then we see Trevenant, which has a decent ability for a spirit, and then Lockup could be another decent piece in this kind of like stage 1 grass control deck that you could probably build at this point, because there's just so many stage 1s now that are grass types and have control style effects, so that's cool to see. Blossom is a bit more flippy, but if you really want to, there's also a Gloom coming out in the next set, I believe, that allows you to accelerate some energy from the top of your deck. So Blossom could be, could have decent synergy there, I guess. Our Believer, I believe that's how you pronounce its name, is okay. Oil Shot, 90 damage, 1 energy. That's kind of efficient, but it's still a stage 2. And then Healing Fruit says heal or damage from one of your bench Pokemon. So nothing too crazy on that front, but still thought it was worth mentioning just in case that was something that you needed for your deck. Next up, though, is actually the new supporters. So in a rare instance, the trainers are falling way behind in this ranking. So I've got the new supporters, Poppy, Rhyme, and Ortega. Poppy, I think, has some extremely niche uses in GLC. Most of the time, you're only ever attaching to what you need to attach to. So Poppy could help if you just happen to have a new attacker. Maybe your current attacker is damaged or something, but honestly, I think there's just better cards in those situations. Rhyme could be decent, forcing a switch out, but draw 3 is just kind of bad. And Ortega has limited applications. Admittedly, removing a card from your opponent's hand in GLC can be pretty devastating, but because your opponent can just draw a card afterwards, you're not really disrupting them too much. So I didn't think these supporters were particularly great. Next up, those we have Psychic types, and once again, Psychic types are doing pretty well for a set. I think the new Cleffa especially is pretty solid. Only 30 HP, so will be knocked out pretty quickly, but it does have Free Retreat and the amazing attack Grasping Draw. The new Togekiss also has a pretty strong ability, allowing you to draw until you have 8 cards at the end of your turn, which is pretty cool. Can also synergize quite nicely with the Togetic and Togepi, which do allow you to heal a bit of damage when you bench them and evolve them respectively, so that's pretty cool to see. And then this new Houndstone, admittedly the other Houndstone is probably just better, the one that does more damage, which is like a Pokemon in your discard pile. But this one has 2 Ferocious, awful pun name for an attack, that does 80 damage, but if your opponent has exactly 2 or 4 prize cards remaining, this attack actually does 200 damage, so really solid damage for a Psychic type to be doing in GLC. And then Mawile just does 30 for each Psychic Energy attached to this Pokemon. So nothing too crazy here, but definitely some nice additions if you're playing a Psychic type deck. Next up is actually new items and tool cards. Letter of Encouragement, I think, is a really solid one-off. If something was knocked out, you can find some more energy. Patrol Cap could be decent, but Mill's nothing too crazy, apart from like Centiskorch Mill really in GLC. So I don't think this card is super great. Vengeful Punch is okay, admittedly. I think it's a bit better than Rocky Helmet, actually, but depends what you're playing and what you're playing against, really. But Vengeful Punch could have some decent applications. Next up, though, is we actually have Water types. So Water types have some pretty strong additions. Mainly the new Palafin, I think, is definitely an obvious include in most Water decks moving forward. Especially combined with Finzian with Vine Evolution, just means it's that bit much more playable. Because of course, I should say, Finzian will find your Palafin, which is just pretty good, especially in the singleton format. So really like the idea of these making their way into GLC. And then Seismitoad is pretty solid, honestly. Opponent's active attacks costing 1 colorless more is a really solid ability to have, to be honest. And Echoed Voice is doing pretty solid damage as long as it can survive a turn. But that's it for Water types. In second place is actually going to be Fire types. I was tempted to put Water types in second place, but then decided it's so rare that Fire types ever get that many good cards for GLC. I thought it'd be best to put Fire types in second place for a change. So we've got Heatmor, Ninetales, Entei, and potentially the new Camerupt. So Heatmor is just kind of an efficient basic, which is always nice to see. Ninetales has spread applications, which is cool. 9 damage counters is quite a lot to be spreading. And then Entei is just a really, really solid basic, better than Heatmor, honestly, with the ability Pressure and Blaze Ball just being really good attacks that can spiral out of control, which is cool to see. Camerupt might have some decent synergy with cards like Macargo or Mallow in Expanded for GLC, but honestly, this card isn't like super great, but it can do an awful lot of damage. So yeah, Fire type's definitely eating well this set. First place, though, I'm going to say new stadiums because I just think Town Store and League Headquarters have so many different applications. I think both of these cards have, honestly, a strong chance of seeing play. Yeah, League Headquarters might hurt a lot of basic decks in general, but if you have more focus on evolution Pokemon, just putting one of these in play could potentially turn the tide of game in your favor. Yeah, thanks for watching. It's just some overall thoughts. The set is of course both underwhelming for standard and GLC. The trainers are kind of weak even for GLC standards. Cards like Entane Palafin though are highlights, which is good to see. And with every set though, standard GLC does become more possible. Now I did do a video recently where I actually talked about standard GLC and how Obsidian Flames could help standard GLC theoretically, so be sure to check that out if you're interested in this format. But yeah, it's been Ember Power. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think down below and hope to see you next time. Thank you for watching.